Welcome to Recharge with Richardson. 5 minutes of hope and inspiration from God's Word every day of your work week. I'm just super glad to be able to be with you this first Friday of May, and I'm really excited today about what we're going to talk about from God's Word. And I've been called these few thoughts, hope when it's hopeless. Comes from Psalm chapter 16, verses 8 to 11. And I want you to understand that this psalm is something that Bible scholars really are looking and saying that really is prophetic about the Messiah, Jesus, and his suffering on the cross and his death and his hope of resurrection. And so just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this passage. I'm going to read the verses now for you, and then I'm going to talk with you about the foundation of hope and the four things that the foundation of hope rests on. Verse 8 begins, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope. For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, that's another word for the grave, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And there's just some super powerful things that I want to share with you because at a time like this in today's world, as you know, we continue to go through the whole COVID-19 aftermath and dealing with that and what's going to happen. A lot of people are feeling kind of hopeless, and it's easy for hope to get pushed to the back burner. And so I just want to share with you four things that your hope can rest on. First of all, in verse 8, David says, I have set the Lord always before me. In other words, the first piece of having hope in your life is a relationship with God. That's where it starts. And what I want to point out here is that David says, I have set the Lord always before me. And that's so critical. This is not just like, oh, I accepted Jesus into my heart 10 years ago, or, oh, I went to church last week, or whatever the case might be. He's talking about a constant state of having an awareness of that relationship with God and thinking about him in a connection. And our problem is why I think we often lose hope so much is that we forget about God. We get going through our life and we forget that he's there, and we got to manage things on our own. And when problems come up, oh, I got to figure this out on myself. And so a key to having hope is not to forget about God as we go through life moment by moment, day by day, but to always keep him before us. Another thing that David talks about here is because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. The second foundation of hope is what I call the proximity of God. That means that God is close to us. That's what he's saying. He's not way out there somewhere in the far distant reaches of the universe up on some throne that he's completely disconnected from what's going on, but he's right here. He's at my right side. And when David says, I shall not be moved, that doesn't sound very interesting. Not be moved, no big deal. The Hebrew word there is really mean, I shall not be shaken. I shall not be overthrown. It's a powerful word talking about a stability. And then he says, the reason this is not going to happen because that God is close, therefore I can rejoice in verse 9, and I can be excited, I can be happy. And he says, I will rest in hope. And that word hope means to dwell securely. And if there ever was a time that's relevant, it's now. You know, people are thinking that the government is going to keep them safe. The government can only give us an illusion of security. People are thinking that social distancing or wearing masks is going to protect us. It might help, but it's no guarantee. And so none of these things are really going to give us security. It's only the fact of God's proximity. We can be secure and we can be hopeful because God is close. And then fourth of all, in verse 10, or third of all, he says, you'll not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. This is talking about when Jesus was hanging on the cross, knowing he was going to die and he was going to go into that grave. He had a hope that took him past that. And what I want to point out is the third foundation of hope is what I call triumph through trial. There's no guarantee that bad things aren't going to happen to us. There's no guarantee you might not get sick with COVID-19 or whatever, but God does promise that we will overcome. Jesus knew that even though he was going to die, he was going to go into that grave, he would not stay there. God would not leave him there. God would bring him through and bring him out. And that's what I want you to hear too, that God will bring you through whatever challenge, whatever trial, and you'll get through it. And then last of all, in verse 11, he says, you will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And so the fourth foundation of hope is the presence of God. God is enough. And to be in his presence, that's where life is. That's where fullness of joy is. That's where pleasures forevermore are. All this other stuff, it's not real. It's not going to last. It's going to let you down. It's going to disappoint you. But God won't do that. And so I just want to wrap up today by saying the foundation of hope is a relationship with God, the proximity of God, that we're going to triumph through our trials, and the presence of God. God is enough. God's got this, whatever it is in your life. And I want you to know God's got you. Thank you for joining us for Recharge with Richardson. Join us tomorrow for the next episode. And until then, may God fill you with joy and peace and hope.